All right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret. We are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this series of videos, we are going to be diving into scales and modes. Two things that sound one of them scales, we kind of have an idea, and modes, that sounds crazy, but by the time we're done with this series of videos, this will just be second nature to you, and it'll be easy as all get out, and every guitar player on the planet will be able to understand them. So in this first part, what I want to do is jump right into the major scale. Oftentimes, this is the first scale that most of us learn, and so we'll just kind of start from there. When it comes to scales, we've all seen diagrams similar to this. And what happens here is we have these patterns, right? We start to memorize these patterns, and we position these patterns at different places on the neck. Like, I'll play, position 1 on the 5th fret, or position 2 on the 3rd fret, or whatever it is. And we kind of have these patterns in our minds, and we move them up and down the fretboard. But what happens to our playing is we begin to tend to play vertically, rather than kind of horizontally up and down the neck. We kind of play up and down the strings, very much like we see in these patterns. And what's more damaging when we just look at these patterns is later on, not too terribly far, but 6 months to a year down the road, we kind of find ourselves, burning out, because what we've really done is we kind of meander in these patterns without understanding what they're really telling us. And so our licks become kind of the same. We move them up or down a couple of frets, but generally speaking, we kind of have our licks become these patterns that we start to kind of burn out on, or, hey, I need to find a new pattern. Now, whether or not that sounds good musically is a whole different story. Half the time it does. It's the same reason when you go to potentially listen to a local band in the bar and they sing originals, right? Instead of covers, they might do some originals. And by the third song, these bands start to sound, their third song doesn't sound that much different than the first, whatever. But then you have other groups and bands that, whomever your favorite is, that have this consistency of number ones over and over and over and over. It's because, that's the difference of looking at guitar from a pattern versus a musical perspective, but we'll get to it. But, one of the things that we'll often see with these scale kind of diagrams, then we'll see the numbers, right, 1 and 2. But again, that just kind of says, okay, well, now I know where the first note of the scale is. But what does that necessarily mean? I'll kind of move that up and down. And really, as guitar players, myself included in this, after a year of playing, you still have to kind of figure out where D flat is, for example, right? You can't just look at your fretboard and go, oh, there's D flat. It's because we have these patterns in our minds, and we're just kind of moving them around rather than really understanding the dynamics of the fretboard on a consistent basis. We just look at these patterns. Now, again, we start to take these patterns, and then all of a sudden, we're thinking, oh, I need some new licks, and we're doing some crazy stuff with patterns, and then we're going to the next one, and we're bringing this one over here, and we're moving that one down a little bit to get to the next fret, and all of a sudden, right, boom, and you're burnt out, and your guitar playing is stagnant. You're just not really there anymore, and you're kind of left wondering. So what I want to do now is move into, while we are going to be looking at a pattern, we're going to be talking about patterns from a musical perspective rather than simply a pattern on the fretboard. And the first pattern that I want to look at in this video is the major scale. And this is the pattern. Bear with me because this will make sense. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And that is about the most annoying thing that I could ever possibly say to a group of guitarists. How do I know? Because the first time somebody said this to me, I thought I was going to jump out a window. And we're looking at this and probably thinking, like, is this some internet, World Wide Web thing? What is this? Well, it's a methodology to move and construct, it's to move spacing between notes as we construct a scale. What does that mean? It means we have this major scale, and we're calling it the major scale for a reason. And then we have this pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And how are these two combining to mean something musically? And that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. So here, the first thing I want to talk about is, what do we mean when we say half step? Well, guitar players, we are just going to look at it to mean one fret. If somebody says move up a half step, or move back a half step, or move down a half step, as guitar players, roll your eyes and go, fine, I'll move up one fret or I'll move down one fret. Got it, done. Now we have the whole step. And the whole step is just 2 frets, right? So if somebody's like, oh, move up a whole step or move back a whole step, fine, I'll move up 2 frets or I'll move down 2 frets. That's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. So we're looking at whole step, half step, whole step, half step. All right, we could just say move up 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, right? That's it. Just a different terminology. Now, when we talk about this 1 fret, that means the 2 H's are the half steps, right? And so that's what we're talking about there. And when we talk about 2 frets, we're saying that there's the W's, right? That's the whole step. That's it. Now, there are other terms that you will use referred to as 1 fret, and one of them is called semitone, and that sounds hyper annoying as well, but it still means 1 fret. And you do use these terms semitone in music. You will hear them, but just realize it just means 1 fret. It's just another term for 1 fret. And when we talk about 2 frets, there's a term called tone, of which sometimes you'll hear it called whole tone, but all it really means is 2 frets. So 2 frets, we're looking at, 2 fret, 1 fret, 2 fret, 2 fret, 2 fret, 1 fret. That's it, right? And if we want to just kind of write those numbers out, we have a little bit more knowledge about what this whole, this whole step, half step, whole step, half step thing really means. Right now we have kind of an understanding, right? We get the gist, but it's still not meaningful. It's, fine, we can use the term 1 and 2 frets, but it's not meaningful to us yet. So let's take our beginner favorite key, C major, and we're studying the major scale, so we're going to use a major key, in spite of the fact that we're going to see how the scale actually constructs the key. But here we are in our C major. And as we all know, C major has no sharps and it has no flats. So let's see how this scale kind of becomes meaningful with this WWWH, WWWWH sort of thing, whatever. Well, as we move from C to D, well, that is 2 frets away, right? So if we go from C to D, that's 2 frets. Okay, so it's a whole step. Now, when we go from D to E, and just imagine you're staying on 1 string on your guitar and you're just moving down the fretboard from the head down towards the body. When we go from C to E, we move 2 frets or a whole step. Then, once we go from E to F, well, that's only a half step, right? That's 1 fret away. Now, when we move from F to G, that's also 2 frets, so that's our whole step. G to A, same exact thing, 2 frets or 1 whole step. B to C, the exact same thing, 2 frets away or 1 whole step. Now we're kind of coming to kind of the next phase of our scale, and we always start and end the scale on the exact same note, okay? And we'll get into more of why this happens, but realize that when you write out a scale, as you're putting them together, you always start and stop on the same note. So I'll explain why later. But for now, when we talk about going from B to C, well, that's only 1 fret away, so we have our half step. And that's the C major scale. And the C major scale, the way that it gets constructed with no sharps or no flats, is because from C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, and B to C is a half step. That's where it comes in. That's where this pattern starts to fit together. Now let's take a look at something else here in just, we're going to look at the C major scale here next. But just again, take a look at this. Remember, we start and we stop always on the same note, okay? So with that being said, let's just go ahead and kind of erase the C major and we'll get G major in here. Now when we're looking at G major, you know, we start with G and we always, you know, there's only 7 notes, right? 12 if you start to do sharps and flats, but we have 7 notes, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? It keeps on repeating. So we're going to start with G, and then we move into A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And we just keep on going. So starting with G, G to A is 2 frets away, or a whole step. A to B is also 2 frets, and it's another whole step. B to C is only a half step, so it's 1 fret. C to D is 2 frets, or a whole step. And D to E is a whole step, or 2 frets away. Now you might kind of be looking at this going, what in the world? It's the same thing as C major. There's no sharps, there's no flats here. Like, what is this thing doing? I don't understand. Well, let's take a look where we are right now as we move from our E to our F. Well, the E to the F is not 2 frets. It's not a whole step away. So does that mean this whole pattern is completely broken with G major? It only works with C major? Well, absolutely not. I would never be putting this video together for everybody if that were the case. So what we need to do is get that whole step resolved. And the way that we do that is we make our F sharp. Now, when we look at E to F, we really are looking at E to F sharp, and that's what gives us that whole step. And then, as we said earlier, we always end our scale on the exact same note that we started on, and so therefore we need to pay attention from F sharp to G, which is only 1 step away, one fret away, right? A half step. So when we're looking at this, we see that the key of G major has 1 sharp in it, and it's F sharp. And we know why we have F sharp, because we had to resolve this pattern of whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. And if you remember from your circle of fifths, absolutely, the key of G sharp on your circle of fifths definitely had an F sharp in it. Now, when we're talking about the circle of fifths, we're really talking about chords and keys. Here we're talking about scales. So when you look at the circle of fifths, you have an F sharp chord, which is really your F sharp diminished. But all of that aside, the reason it's F sharp in the key of G is because of this. It is because of this pattern, our major scale, that gave us that F sharp. Okay? This is why. So with that being said, what I want to do now is look at another key that seemingly is a complex key, right? And we're just kind of going down if you remember from the circle of fifths, the right side was fifths and the left side was fourths. So let's make sure that this pattern works throughout all the major keys that we have in our circle of fifths. If you haven't watched the video of the circle of fifths, I strongly encourage you to, but it's not a prerequisite to this. I'm just referencing it. You know, even after you watch this, if you go back and watch the circle of fifths will even make more sense. So you're not missing anything. It's just some references to those viewers who have already watched the circle of fifths. But if you haven't, no, you're not missing out on anything, just kind of some of the references. But all of that aside, let's look at, again, what would be a seemingly complex major key, right? We got E flat. Well, sounds a little crazy, but it's just E flat. And so the first thing we need to do is resolve this first whole step. And if we look at E flat and we move up 1 fret, we'll wind up on E. And then we move up 1 more fret and we wind up on F. So here, E flat moved up a whole step or moved up 2 frets, we wind up with F. Sounds great. Now, from F to our next note in the scale, we have to move up a whole step. Bam. We have our G. Now, from here, our G to our next note has to be a half step. It's very important here to recognize that the way that scales are constructed is they always move to the next letter, meaning a half step away from G, here we can't say G sharp. We can't say E flat to F to G sharp. We can't reuse G. We have to move to A. So that means we have to do something with A to make it only one fret away, right? Because right now, if we go from G to A, we know that that's 2 frets away or one whole step, but we can't have that. And so what we need to resolve that half step or that 1 fret is we need to make A flat, okay? Because again, we can't use G twice. We have to move into A, and then we just have to do something with A to resolve that half step problem. Next, we're looking at A flat, and we have to move up a whole step or 2 frets. And if we move up from A flat, we move up 1 fret, that gets us to A. Then we move up 1 more fret, that gets us to B flat. So here, the whole step to B doesn't work out, but we can't use, A again or whatever. That doesn't work. We have to use B, and we have to resolve that whole step, and so therefore we resolve that with our B flat. Now from here, from our B flat, we once again have to move up a whole step. We have to move up 2 frets, and we know we have to move into C. Well, incidentally, from B flat to C is a whole step, right? Because B flat to B is 1 fret, and B to C is another fret. So we've got just good old-fashioned C. No C flat, no nothing, right? Now from C, we have to move up another whole step, or 2 frets. And that's pretty straightforward. That just gives us our D, right? Now, we know that we're going to end the scale on the exact same note that we started it on. So this last half step is kind of a verification for us, right? If we move from D to any, and that half step doesn't resolve to an E flat, well, we would be in trouble. But in this case, it does. And so when we're looking at this, the major scale of E flat has an E flat, an A flat, and a B flat in it. And again, if you've seen the circle of fifths, you can go back and you can look at it, and once again, you will see that the key of E flat major has an A flat, a B flat, and an E flat. Okay? So again, we're applying the pattern to the actual scale. So once, just kind of running through one more, this one has a lot of sharps in it. So if we go from F sharp and we move up a whole step, 2 frets, we wind up not on G, but we wind up on G sharp. And from G sharp, we move up 2 frets. We don't wind up on A, we wind up instead on A sharp. From here, we only have to move up a half step, and we know we're moving into B. So from an A sharp, we have a B. That's 1 fret. From here, we know we're going to C, but B to C is only 1 fret. So we, once again, need our sharp. Okay? So B to C sharp gives us those 2 frets. C sharp, moving up a whole step or moving up 2 frets, is going to give us not D, but instead it's going to give us our D sharp. And then finally from here, once again, we have to move up 2 frets, and this doesn't give us E, it gives us instead our E sharp. Now, one thing I want to point out here just really quick with this E sharp, as you're moving up your fretboard on whichever string that you're using, right, and just hopefully you're just kind of starting up, like I said, on the same string, kind of towards the head of the guitar, moving down towards the body. When you come up to E sharp, you're going to look at your fretboard, at least I know I did, And I would say, okay, what's the difference between E sharp and F? My finger's on the exact same string on the exact same fret. And I'd get annoyed. And E sharp is F. And, if I was talking to another musician, in particular somebody who played piano or keyboard, they'd be like, no, E sharp is not F. And I'm looking at my finger on my fretboard, and I'm like, yes, it is. E sharp is F. And there'd be a whole back and forth until I felt like throwing my guitar at other musicians or throwing it out the window. But the reason that we have E sharp here, we don't have F in this scale. We have E sharp. And the difference between E sharp and F isn't tonality, because you're on the same string on the same fret. It's, if you hit that F and you have a tuner with you, it's probably going to show F. It's not going to show E sharp. It may, but I doubt it. E sharp and F are tonally identical. The difference is musically, when we structure music, we structure it using the E sharp. In this particular case, right? Because we're in the F sharp major. So we're using E sharp to structure our music, but tonality, yes, E sharp and F are going to be the same on your fretboard. But that's the difference, right? So if you're ever looking at what is the difference between F and E sharp, or it doesn't matter, you take your pick. What's the difference between D flat and C sharp? It's not about tonality. It's about music structure. So just keep that in mind, okay, as we kind of move forward. But anyways, I digress. Let's go ahead and finish off the F sharp major scale. Now from here, we have that half step, which we said is kind of our area to, kind of do a, self-check to make sure everything's turned out okay. And we know that we can only move up one fret from E sharp. And since our finger right now, if we're, holding down the E sharp, if we move up just one fret, we know that we're on F sharp, right? And so that works out because we don't, E sharp and F, right? Tonality, same, but we need to move up that one fret. So we wind up with F sharp, and there's our F sharp major scale, okay? This is how it all just kind of works out. And, with this, you start to get a good feel for the difference between tonality, musical structure, and how things are starting to kind of work together a little bit better, okay? So we started and we stopped on the same note, worked out great. So far, we've seen the C major scale, and we've seen how the whole step, half step, whole step, half step worked out. I'm hoping you're getting tired of listening to me say that pattern, but I hope that you do remember it, because you can structure out any major scale and key that you need. We've seen the F sharp, and if we remember, C sharp is the only key that has a B sharp. F sharp has 6 sharps in it, and if you look back at the circle of fifths, you'll see that. Or if you look at any diagram online, you'll see it as well. B sharp only happens in the C sharp major. It doesn't happen in F sharp major, so that's another verification that we have things working out pretty smoothly here. Now, in addition to that, we didn't just pay attention to keys with sharps in them, we also paid attention to keys with flats in them. And one of the things that you hopefully are looking at with this key is you'll notice that this is flats and the other one, F sharp, with sharps. You won't see intermingled sharps and flats in scales. And some of the hyper advanced ones that, make up like 0.05% of all music on the planet, there might be some craziness we can talk about, but generally speaking, you don't see sharps and flats combined. You'll see in a scale, you'll see flats or you'll see sharps. You won't see them getting intermingled. So again, just wanted to kind of point that out. Now from here, just taking a look back at the C major scale, and now down at the bottom, the half step, whole step stuff. I'm going to kind of remove that from the graphic just to clean it up a little bit. Now here, what we're really talking about, regardless of which key we're using, is we're really saying between the first note and the second note in a major scale is 2 frets or a whole step. And we're also saying from the second to the third is also 2 frets or a whole step. From the third to the fourth notes in a major scale is a half step. From the fourth to the fifth note is a whole step, or 2 frets, however you want to look at it. At this point, you're probably getting tired of me kind of differentiating between the two. But from the 5th to the 6th, whole step. From the 6th to the 7th, it's another whole step. And finally, from the 7th to the last note is a half step. Now you'll notice above C, I have this 8. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, C is a C, so shouldn't that be the first? But if I had numbered this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, there might be a lot of people that go, wow, you know, this guy's lost his mind. But I'm putting it at 8 here, but there's probably philosophical debate on whether or not this is an 8 or a 1. And if you'll remember from the initial diagram of scales that we looked at, we had 1s on a few of the dots. And if you look at, you know, most of the scale kind of diagrams that look like that, you'll see a 1 in a couple of different places on the scale. So the first time you see 1 might be on the 6th string. The next one is on the 4th string. The last one is on the 6th string, whatever it may be, right? So our scale is, you know, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then the next time we hit C, we kind of start the whole pattern over again, right? So it's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, right? It just kind of runs through. So that's why the 8 is there. But I want to explain one other thing, and I'm going to keep the 8 there just for a moment. But one other thing that we can pay attention to is we have this 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. And you may be thinking, okay, why, you know, what is there any significance to moving up 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret? Why? Well, if we add all of those numbers up, what we've really done is we've moved up 12 half steps, or we've moved up 12 frets, which means that in our scale, we've covered 1 octave. So when we look at the scale above in the C major, and we start on C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, when we come to that far right C that has the number 8 on top of it right now, that's really an octave up. So when you see the number 1 on the scales, as you're looking through those diagrams, each one of them, as you're kind of moving up and down from the 6th string down to the 1st string, each one of those represents an octave up, right? And so, yeah, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then the next time you hit C, that's an octave higher than the first one that you started. So that's what we're doing here, right? We only have, you know, 7 notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, but C starts over again, but it starts over 1 octave higher than what we initially were on. So anyways, that is the major scale. And from here, when we talk about the minor scale, which is the next video I'm going to do, then we're going to move into modes. And the thing about it is, mode sounds kind of freaky. I know it freaked me out, but it's so hyper easy once, because everything is built off of this. Everything, minor scale, built off of this. Dorian, Mixolydian, Phrygian, crazy names that don't even worry about. Like, let those names just kind of slide right off. But they are all constructed from this major scale, which, by the way, is called the Ionian scale. So Ionian mode. But this major scale is the secret to everything. Everything. It's even the secret to the whole circle of fifths, right? As we looked at the G major and how we got the F sharp from that. So remember this pattern, and, you know, experiment with some of the keys by yourself, and you'll get it in no time. And, you know, I know this was a little bit of a long video, but this is the most important scale pattern that you are ever going to learn. And once you learn it, everything else is so incredibly easy. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and close out the video, and we will see you in the next video to discuss the minor scale. Take care, everybody.